Это.
Не знам тега зманежа. Hello everybody and welcome to webinar on what is new regarding the International Professional Practice Framework. I would like to welcome all participants for joining us today for this 90-minute session, and also I would like to welcome both speakers on today's webinar. So on this webinar we will address changes to the IPPF, to the whole practices framework, and also specifically we will talk about standards that became effective in 2017. Many of you know DEF, so as you know, we support capacity development for finance officials, our learning program. And I would like to add here that we started designing and delivering webinars in 2017. Also in our auditing program, we designed and delivered webinar series on financial management and control. And as is connected to this area, I can welcome you or direct you to our website where you can find recordings of this webinar series. As well, you can find also recordings of other webinars. So also in 2018, we will continue delivering webinars, and also we are preparing other novelties. A couple of technical information before we start with first presentation. So we kindly ask you to stay muted during others' presentation so that everybody will be able to hear presenters. Then we kindly ask you to use the chat area for your questions or your comments on anything that you would like to share with others. And when you send your message, please send it to everyone so that everyone will be able to see what you are trying to share. Also, we are recording this webinar, so also recording will be available for you. In case you would like to listen to some parts, you will be able to do this. Also, we will share with you all presentations after the webinar. So on this short session today, we would like to help you to understand specifics of IPPF. So IPPF is this global framework that guides your work, and we think that also understanding of these main changes will help you to deal with new requirements. We know that role of auditors is developing. This is always like evolving role. Also with this webinar, we will help you to keep up with these new requirements, so that you will be able to understand these requirements and also then to translate them in your work. So I'm very happy that today with us are two speakers. First, I would like to present Tina Tuman-Pfeiffer. She's currently head of on-site inspection sections at Slovenian Insurance Supervision Agency. She is also vice president of Slovene chapter of IIA, a very experienced internal auditor, also with experience from public sector. So she will share with us today her knowledge, her understanding of current changes of IPPF. And then I would like to present also Daniela Danescu. She's a member of IA Romania, experienced trainer and speaker on internal auditing topics. She also has experience in public sector and is a contributor to IA. She's contributing with articles, especially on public sector area. So I'm very happy that we today joined with both speakers who will help us present these main changes, how it affects our work of internal auditors, and then come up with some main conclusions how to really, keep up with new requirements and our role. So about the agenda, after the introduction and overview, we will hand over to Tina Toman's presentation, and she will give us presentation on and she will let us understand framework of IPP and IPPF, and especially what to those changes and how we can understand this current updated IPPF. Then Daniela Danescu will speak about changes to the start. She will learn how to understand those changes, especially in the public sector. Then we will again listen to another presentation by Tina, and she will present an example of how these changes affected on in Slovenia. And then we will conclude the takeaways, your questions and answers that you can anytime post on in chat area. So before we give word to Tina, I would like to ask you or welcome you to go to our page to see what is there in 2018. Program, especially in auditing area, as presented. We are planning many novelties for you, and also first workshop will start, upcoming workshop in February, so start soon. It's on quality assurance improvement programs. Also for others, we are opening locations, so you are very much welcome to visit are here in Ljubljana. We will give word to Tina. We can see already Tina. So you will hear about changes in IPPF, also how to understand them. It's yours. Yeah, that's it.
Kaya. And good morning to all the participants. I would like to welcome you and first of all thank Kaya and CEF for giving me the opportunity to speak at this event, and also thank you for your time to participate here. So Richard Chambers, the CEO of the IA, in his recent January blog about internal auditors resolution for 2018, they must focus on developing new skills to meet new demands and mark the courage needed to take on difficult challenges. So this is why we are here today. You are going to have the opportunity to hear what is new within the internal auditors framework. So let's start with my presentation. The IA is a global organization for internal auditors. It is a recognized authority and, of course, a leader not only in internal auditing profession, but also in risk management, governance, internal controls, IT, and security area. Besides different IIA chapters, we also have different local organizations in different countries for internal auditing, sometimes specialized for public sector. In Slovenia, for example, we have Budget Supervision Office, which is a part of the Ministry of Finance, and a central body of the Public Internal Financial Control System, which is responsible for development, harmonization, and supervision of the financial management and internal control system, as well as internal audit of direct and indirect budget spending sectors on the central and local level. So all the documents issued by the IIA are then implemented into Slovenian public sector office. All issued by the IIA on the global level are included in so-called IPPF, which is the abbreviation for the International Professional Practice Framework, which is, of course, a framework for internal. As before I shortly describe the IPPF, I would like to share with you some steps in of the IPPF. So there are several working groups working on the IPPF. First of all, there is an International Professional Practice Framework Oversight Council, which is a body established by the IIA and advise the IIA on the adequacy and the appropriation of the IIA's IPPF standard and guidance setting process. Then we have International Internal Audit Standards Board, and we couldn't have any of those documents without a lot of help of guidance, different guidance committees, IIA institutes, and of course IIA Global Headquarters staff. The National Internal Audit Standards Board proposed changes to the international standards, professional practice of internal auditing, and exposed them a few years ago for public comment with and of course with the description of all the reasons for changes. The International Internal Audit Standards Board released the revised standards in October 2016 with an effective date of January 1st, 2017. Afterwards also the implementation guides were released to replace former practice advisories. So what changes? There are quite a lot of reasons. First of all, we are aware of the changes in business environment. Perhaps changes are faster in a private sector than in public sector, but also public sector needs to be up to date also. The next reason is that updates were also proposed to address the July 2015 changes to the IPPF, such as the addition of core principles, and especially the principle being that internal auditors must be insightful, proactive, and future-focused, has now been implemented into the standards. Third, also very important reason that the role of chief audit executives changed over years. In the past, chief audit executive could be also appointed for internal auditors, and now the responsibilities and the roles of chief audit executive could fall outside of internal auditing. For example, the chief audit executive could be also in charge for compliance risk management function. Some things haven't changed now. This is the definition and the code of ethics. This picture shows the transformation from the previous to the existing IPPF, so you can see changes were really quite important. I put some important facts from the IPPF to the next few slides. It is my opinion that which is also the opinion from my experiences, that internal auditors forget all on the definition and core principles, but the mission is one of the most important things implemented now into the IPPF. The mission of the IPPF and the mission of internal audit is that we really have to protect an organization, and that we have to provide risk-based and objective, not only assurance, but also advice and insight. So if we as internal auditors would like to be in compliance with our professional framework, we must be proactive. IPPF has some mandatory and some recommended guidance. Core principles, also something new from 2015. First three principles, so integrity, competence, and objective, are core principles talking about internal auditor. Then we have 4 core principles talking about internal audit activity. So it must be objective, it must be risk-based, it must be appropriately positioned and also resourced. It must show the quality and continuous improvement, and also communication must be really effective. Last 3 core providing the results of internal audit. So assurance must be risk-based, and almost the last one, which is the most important in my opinion, the results must be mindful, proactive, and future-focused, and results must promote the organizational improvement. So perhaps it is sometimes difficult for experienced internal auditors to move from regular or traditional internal audits to future-focused internal audits, but this is the only right way if we want to be in compliance with the IPPF. Got the definition, you don't have to memorize the definition, but it is a fact that we must set value by systematic approach, and the scope of our work must be risk management, control, and governance processes. This is also something that is usually forgotten by the internal auditors, but the scope of our risk management and governance processes besides only the internal control system. We can't forget about the 4 principles of Code of Ethics. So, and have a certain level of integrity, objectivity, confidentiality, and privacy. Regarding the recommended guidance, the recommended guidance are available only to the IIA members. Implementation guidance and supplemental guidance, I think that you cannot work as an internal auditor if you have the access to the implementation guidance and supplemental guidance, because this is something, these are documents that really assist internal auditor in applying the standards, and some of the documents, especially supplemental guidance, formal practice guides, really provide detailed processes and procedures for internal auditor practitioners. So this is it for the first part of presentation, and now back to Kaya.
Thank you, Ina. We'll now give word to Daniela, hear about changes to the standards. So Daniela, yeah, floor is yours. You sharing your screen.
Everybody, and thank you for attending this webinar tonight. Revision to the standard was needed because of the new IPPF, as was presented by Tina. So the format of the standard didn't change. Of course, the content did. Definition, because it's the same for so many years. The definition of internal auditing was promulgated in 1999, so it exists in relations around the world. But content of the standards is continuously updated, and that's the focus of my presentation today. In 2015, the IA released a new IPPF to better support internal audit practitioners in filling the profession's evolving role with an insightful, proactive, and future-focused perspective, just like Tina mentioned. 10 core principles are also a good means of communication to our stakeholders, to audience. We will not expect them to read the standards. So the overview of key changes to the standards were mainly the addition of 2 new standards, 11-12, the chief audit executive roles beyond internal auditing, and safeguards necessary to address the potential impairments we will see, and an implementation standard 1130. Internal audits may provide assurance services where they previously performed consulting services. Important change is the updating to existing standards to clarify requirements, like principles, new since July 2015, and on the standards whenever they refer to the definition to the Code of Ethics and the standards themselves. The definition was not included, so now little by little they are also including some of the elements of these core principles. Adherence to principles is emphasized also, which may or will be reflected in the quality assurance and improvement program with standard 1300. The scope of the external quality assessor now is added. They must opine on conformance with standard and Code of Ethics. Important change to standard 2050 coordination. So with the addition of reliance, I would like to spend a little bit time on this. All communication between Chief Audit Executive, the Board, and Senior Management Standard 2016. And just to the glossary, I would like to spend a little bit time on Board. New standard. In 12, Chief Audit Executive roles beyond internal auditing. So this is internal audit activities combined with other organizational activities. In the course of recent years, the Chief Audit Executive has been asked or expected to take on additional risk management and or internal control related responsibilities. All the requirements for organizational independence and individual objectivity are well known, so they were implied in the interpretation of objectivity and independence standards. They may be challenged when internal audit activities are combined with other organizational activities. This standard makes very clear that if you have some additional roles, it must be clarified here. Are established to address potential impairments to Chief Audit Executive's independence and objectivity include, for instance, statements in the organization's policies and collectives, the Audit Committee's charter, and the internal audit activity mission statement, and approved audit charter, which specifies the Chief Audit Executive's roles and responsibilities associated with senior management and the board. Also, minutes of board meetings, during which the Chief Audit Executive disclosed potential impairment to independence or objectivity, proposed safeguards to mitigate risks of impairment to acceptable levels. And are some examples of Chief Audit Executive roles outside of internal audit. The Chief Audit Executive may be expected to assume responsibilities in areas of risk management, design, and operational control and governance. For example, if a Chief Audit Executive is asked to take on a role that reports functionally to senior management instead of the board, the Chief Audit Executive's independence related to internal audit activities and responsibilities may be impaired or may be appear to be impaired. In certain circumstances, the board and senior management may find that it is appropriate for the organization to expand the Chief Audit Executive's role beyond internal auditing. Situations when the Chief Audit Executive may be asked to perform a role which management is normally responsible include the following. So the situation. Why regulatory requirement prompts a pressing need? This is a temporary job. Here there are no policies and internal audit will develop them. Situation. Again, risk management. Nobody is able to do it, so internal audit will help. IPPF is more about like a permanent role for internal audit. So together with risk management under one roof. For example, like American Express, they have vice president, internal audit, risk management, and under one roof. The next one is about compliance and internal audit in one function. Most you will see that some of the second line functions are also taken care by internal audit. Example, like in the most of the United Nations organizations, you have the Office of the Inspector General. Under the Inspector General, they have fraud investigations, evaluation of programs, and internal audit. Last situation, organizations, risk management and internal audit. Under the need, there will be two separate units, but one who is called Chief Audit Executive has a double role. Therefore, the second and third line of defense are blurring in this situation. This is not the optimal solution. There are on the third line of defense, but play a role on the second line of defense. For instance, from the point of view of the internal audit services at the European Commission, the agencies at country member level, internal audit is on the second line of defense. But if you are looking to the pay agency itself, there the internal auditors are on the third line of defense. For the internal audit services at the Commission, who has to audit the pay agencies, they consider this to be a second line of defense. So this line of defense, you always have to put it in where am I now? Am I at the top, somebody from outside, or am I inside? The second new standard, 1130, impairment to independence or objectivity. So the standard did not address assurance following consulting. This new standard adds clarity to reiterate the need to maintain objectivity. So it doesn't work in two ways. You provide consulting, you cannot provide assurance. Here the opposite one is allowed. So make a special implementation standard on this. In fact, you may provide assurance services where you previously performed consulting, but of course you have to look at whether management took full responsibility of the device of the internal audit when implemented the system, whether it is perceived to be a system. It's important to notice that if it's perceived as in your system, of course, then you have an objectivity issue afterwards. So to look at, because in objectivity, you have to consider perception. You can be objective, you can assign other people to it, you have a big team. For instance, let's say at the ministry level, central level, your country, you have internal audit directorate. It is to play with this, have a big team, but if you are only a team of 2 auditors, let's say at the civil level, and has provided consulting services, and the other one has to provide assurance later on, there is still the perception, I will declare something not good enough if my good colleague has implemented it there, right? Has provided consulting services. You have to focus here on the perception. This is the principle. Case by case, you have to interpret whether you are in line with this principle, yes or no. It is a matter of fact. This is in fact valid for all of you when you provide a recommendation. Because the recommendation that you provide is already a consulting service. You advise something. It is important to note that the internal audit policy manual must include policies on independence, on objectivity, addressing conflicts, and nature of impairment, and how to communicate them. And some changes to the standards and updates. So first one, the Quality Assurance and Improvement Program Standard 1300. There to the principles is emphasized, which may or will be reflected in the Quality Assurance and Improvement Program. So the quality assurance is not about purely compliance with what is written, but what is beyond it, the spirit of the standard. The change here, in fact, is in the interpretation. They added one sentence referring to the responsibility of the audit committee. When you mean board oversight, it is audit committee oversight over the quality assurance program. I'll come back at the end of the presentation to talk a little bit more about the board meeting. This happening is valid for both internal assessments and for external assessments. At the external assessment standard 1312, this has become like a mandatory requirement that you must provide an opinion on how the audit unit compares with the standards and code of ethics. You use it in terms of the IA, generally conforms, partially conforms, or not conform. But it provides free options, so the majority will pick up, choose the middle one, partially conforms. I prefer to have 4 options because you have 2 good ones and 2 bad ones, but no middle one. And then reduce perceived or potential conflict of interest. Imagine you go to the market and win the winner because of the price, but the organization who will do the external assessment already involved in training of your auditors. Is the conflict of interest? Yes or no? It's maybe a perceived conflict of interest. So in fact, the role of the board. So they will not decide who will do it, at least they can have a look at it and then say, yes, for us it's okay. Slide presents the start 1320 about reporting on the quality assurance and improvement program. I think that all of you have already underground external assessments in your organization. Here they speak the minimum role. Sometimes with the organization, where there is a change in the chief audit executive or in the chairman of the audit committee, these people are saying, I will have an external assessment because I want to know what I inherit here. There are maybe, of course, other reasons. Now, about the internal assessment. You have the assessment, of course, supervision, etc. That's ongoing, but periodic self-assessment. The standard does not say anything about this, but it is a good practice to have it at least every 2 years, especially for larger audit units. Almost every time that you develop your strategic plan, your long-term plan, let's say every 3 years. So it may be a good idea, for instance, to have your formal internal quality assessment done before the development of your strategic plan, so that you can then incorporate the result of this your next plan. And coordination and reliance. As I mentioned in the beginning, one of the key changes is the addition of reliance. And it's very important for internal audit because if you don't rely properly on the results of work, it may affect your independence and objectivity. And I have to spend a little bit time on this part and issue. So here we are talking mainly, but not exclusively, about the work of, for instance, the second line of defense. But it may be also the work of the first line of defense. So the first line of defense, which is the operational management, from time to time, they are organizing self-assessment workshops. In workshops, they can provide assurance not only to the boss of the unit, but also to their superiors about how risks are well controlled. Now, what internal audit can do to make an assessment on how does this workshop function? Are the results reliable? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, it's on high quality, rely on these results. That's why I include them into my overall opinion. Here interpretation anew of the standard, because you can decide to rely on anybody else, you must make an assessment of the quality of their work. What are their objectives and their scope. You just cannot take the results of others' work. You have to look at that. Secondly, what you should never forget is the principle of accountability. If If you rely on the others, you remain accountable for the entire thing at the end because it is your overall opinion. Shortly, an example for this important standard that I put here, implementation guidance, is the implementation guide for standard 2050. So the implementation guidance assists internal auditors in applying the mandatory elements of the IPPF. So one way to coordinate assurance coverage is to create an assurance map by linking identified significant risk categories, relevant sources of assurance, and rating the level of assurance provided for each risk category. Be comprehensive, it excludes gaps and duplications in assurance coverage, enabling the Chief Audit Executive to evaluate the efficiency of assurance services in each risk area. So that can be discussed with the other assurance providers, that the parties may reach an agreement about how to coordinate activities to minimize duplication of efforts and maximize the efficiency and effectiveness of assurance coverage. Because we talked about the free lines of defense model, I will use it as an example of assurance map. So the very first line of defense, the operational management, they provide assurance both from boss to the other boss, to the big boss, etc. They all provide assurance in a cascade. It's not independent or objective assurance, but it is assurance. And the second line of defense, when these functions exist, they will pick up some items and they will provide a bit more independent assurance, directly to a member of senior management. Line of defense, internal audit, will provide assurance of some items or assurance of what the first line of defense, the operational management, has provided. Now, all of that provides assurance on what and reassurance of what. That should be included in one map. So you start with risks. You can identify the risk map. You can identify the controls next to it. But it's also important to identify who provides assurance on what. Because top management, the assurance should not be for the top management. They can see where it's over assurance, too much assurance, and I think about coordination. Or where you can see, there is a very critical risk, and then I want to have more than one party to provide assurance. This can be done with the assurance map. Avoiding gaps, and sometimes emphasizing that you want to have a duplication because you want to differentiate between, let's say, independent and independent assurance. This compliance is important because we enable Chief Audit Executive at the end of the year to come up with an overall opinion about the entire organization, consolidating what has been performed by others. Like any other standard, you will have to prove what you have done to conform to be in compliance with that. So you have a kind of a strategy. You can rely on the work of others, what work that needs to be done. You're going to assess them first, etc. But that you remain accountable for the entire assurance that you provide, which rely on others. Or in some cases, you have relied on the assurance of another provider. What are the reasons for that? And explain that you have done yourself or more into details. Reliance on the work of others. For example, every director general or president or whatever is called of an agency at the European Union country level has to make an annual activity report to report to the European Commission in Brussels. That activity report includes a declaration of assurance. You may be familiar with this. This declaration of assurance risks in their agency are under control. This declaration of assurance that the Director General signs is based, in fact, on the results of the work of others. Include internal audit work, the internal controls work, include also reports from the external audit, etc. So based on all these reports, the director says, I feel confident by saying that my risks are under control. So this is very shortly about coordination and reliance. The change I would like to present to you is the standard 2060, reporting to senior management and the board. So this is the communication between Chief Audit Executive, the board, and senior management. So about what we include in the activity report, it is added to the interpretation of the standard. So your activity report, whatever you call it, it's basically it can be quarterly, can be semi-annual, or an annual report. You must specify that you are in conformance with START and the Code of Ethics, and that significant risks that you encounter during your audits, if some of them are thematic or repetitive, you will also highlight them in your activity report, specifically all the matters that require the attention of the senior management and the board. In the interpretation. So first, what your activity report must include. Information about the audit charter. Going to report it every month, at least once a year. You should tell them that your charter, in fact, is still safe, the current evolution of the profession of internal audit, etc., or with the changes within the organization. I published last year in March model audit charter model, so with supplementary guidance, I encourage you to have a look at it and compare your charter with the model provided. So you must also, and that's a kind of declaration that you are independent and that your independence has not been threatened during the year throughout the year. The progress of activity report is also to match what you have done versus what I plan to do. So this is plan versus achievements, right? Resource requirements. This is not statistics about the past, but to continue to fulfill our plan for the coming period. Where are we with our resources? Where are the gaps, etc. In the case that you have seen that management or operational management is affecting risk which is not in line with either the risk appetite of the organization or with their level of authority, you must also report that here. And the updates to the standard glossary that include the definition of core principles was added, and some clarifications and definition of board and IPPF and Chief Audit Executive. I would like to spend a moment about the board. So some people ask standards to refer to board and, for instance, not to audit committee. Because not all organizations around the world have an audit committee. An audit committee is usually a subcommittee of a board. So therefore, in fact, it remains the full responsibility of the board. Therefore, the standards are always preferred to stick to boards. However, in some countries, there are different kind of boards. Like in the Netherlands, we have the managing board called the Raad van Bestuur, and the supervisory board called the Raad van Commissarissen. In the United States, another example, they have one board of directors with executive and non-executive directors as members. So, in conclusion, whenever the standards here refer to board, it's always to that body that is in charge of monitoring and supervision and not managing. Thank you very much for your attention, and waiting for your questions.
Thank you very much, Daniela, for your very comprehensive overview of changes. So we heard that there were 2 new standards added to framework, and also there were quite many updates of standards. Yeah, if you have like any question for Daniela or for Tina, please put them in the chat area. We will address this question after now Tina's second part of her presentation. Tina, again, floor is yours for your second part.
Thank you. Now I would like to say some words about public sector. I think that we are all that IIA standards are prepared for these types of organizations. So for smaller organizations, larger ones, for the organizations in private sector, and for the organizations in public sector. But public sectors from the private sector, for example, we have many different organizational forms in public sector, from government to agencies. Then, usually the organizations in public sector have a very wide and complex legal framework. It's that private sector creates profit by finding customers, and in public sector we have to attract customers and service users. Public sector usually have a limited use of resources. There is high level of transparency and accountability. So there are some important differences between public and private sector. This is perhaps why IIA also prepared some documents which have special requirements or special modifications only for the public sector. Those documents that are on my site are also available at the website, IIA website. You can see that this document is from February 2016, which means that we are actually waiting for some updates. But anyway, since the maturity level in our Slovenian and I'm pretty sure that some other public sector organizations varies, I really believe that some of those documents could still be used in our organizations. Besides that, some national organizations already prepared some additional documents that are used especially in public sector. I choose UK example and Slovenian example. So the IIA chapter from UK prepared a special document called Public Sector Internal Audit Standards. The document has all the mandatory documents from the IPPF. For example, the of internal audit, definition of internal auditing, core principles for the professional practice of internal auditing, code of ethics, which is the same as the one from the IIA, and of course the standards. And it is pretty much the same for the Slovenian public sector. We also have the guidance for state internal auditing. The document is only in Slovenian language, but the document also has some legal basis. And then this is the mission, which is the same as the mission from the IIA. The document has the core principles, the definition of the internal auditing, the code of ethics with 4 principles, and of course the standards. What I would like to emphasize here is that both of the documents have certain modification or certain additional requirements for the public sector. So you can see the standard 1000, purpose, authority and responsibility, which is from the beginning the same as the IIA standard, and then the UK document has certain additional requirements only for the public sector. And the standards in Slovenian guidelines, we have the standard 1000, purpose, authority and responsibility, and then again additional requirements. We have a special name or the number of the standard, so the standard 1000, and then the mark for Slovenian and state internal auditing, so additional requirements or explanations when you would like to implement that standard, that particular standard, into the environment of Slovenian public sector. What those special requirements and those requirements could be the same in UK, in Slovenia, or in some other country. I believe that it's not working in a way like copy-paste, but I think that you must be aware of the maturity level and the organizational structure of public sector, and then you have to do the modification regarding the fix which are basically recognized within your public sector. In Slovenia, the budget supervision office also prepared some additional documents, like kind of position papers for the public sector. In Slovenian budget users, don't always have a permanent internal auditors. There are a lot of examples where internal auditing is outsourced, and the budget supervision office recognized some issues or problems while internal auditing is outsourced. From the public procurement processes to the contracts between budget users and the internal audit. So they prepared some additional guidelines or position papers, for example, like this one, which is referring to the standard 1000, but you know that standard 1000 is describing the internal audit charter. So for all the examples, when Slovenian users would like to outsource the internal audit activity, and they have to have a contract between the bad users and the providers. There are several requirements which to be included into the contract. So, for example, the scope of contract, the purpose of internal auditing, the responsible person who is in charge for supervision, and so on. What are the responsibilities of the provider of the internal auditing? All of those requirements are described with this document and must be implemented into the contract, which is signed by the budget user and the internal auditing provider. So I would like to encourage you to read two documents to see about the characteristics recognized in UK or recognized in Slovenia, some characteristic only in public sector, and that because I'm sure that you are aware of the maturity level and some other characteristics of your public sector, that you implement some additional requirements into guidelines, position papers, or some other documents. So from my slides, you are going to see the links for specific websites, and if you have any questions with the Slovenian website, because all the documents are in Slovene language, please do not hesitate to contact me. So thank you for your attention, and I'm also waiting for your questions.
Thank you, Tina, for providing these two examples. So, showed us how in Slovenia and in UK IPPF is translated into public sector, how institutes, I can say, are adopting additional requirements because of specifics of public sector environment. So participants, we heard, I think now in this 1 hour, many changes. Probably if you have any question, any another clarification is needed specifically for your situation, for your institution, you can ask your question. Send it, please send it to everybody so that we can read it out. Maybe you can also share your experience, what you see most the implementation, or in general, to be able to conform with standards. Maybe while we are waiting for others to see, to write any question, I can use this opportunity to ask other speakers what kind of difficulties of new IPPF you see as most significant or most problematic. So considering internal audit in public sector context. The public sector context is a bit different, especially where there are no audit committees. So also we heard about 3 lines of defense. Maybe it's not so structured. So where do you see, or what kind of difficulties in implementation you see as problematic? Maybe to Daniela. Mute yourself.
One question I was asked when I presented this addition of reliance of other work. For example, how can we have the access to work papers, for example? So if you ask for the results of others' work that are online below you, this is simple because you have the authority to do it and will get the material. But if you like, for example, want to use the results of an external auditor, let's say at a high level, let's say the European Court of Auditors, the Luxembourg, they will share with you their work papers. So you, case by case, you have to see where you have the authority and also a good communication. Then you can have access to the information. Another question was about, do we go back to internal control when we take other responsibilities beyond internal auditing? And this is an interesting question, and I'm happy I can share some thoughts here with you. So we have to look precisely what it means internal control versus internal audit. So the internal control is a process, and we have to understand this very well and clear, and we do the internal audit function. The internal control is integrated into the operational process, while the internal audit is independent of operational processes. The internal control is carried out by operational staff members, and while the internal audit is carried out in full independence for the operational staff and units. So if we look at the picture, we see that the internal audit actually is the part of the system of internal control. We don't take their role. This is also important to know. Another question was asked during European Commission in Brussels was what about compliance? Because we know now the mainly part of our activity as internal auditors is still about compliance. So look at the big picture, the European level, is emphasized on giving performance as a key achievement. So this is included in the priorities of Jean-Claude Juncker, the chairman of the European Commission. So managers need to measure the performance because they are accountable, and auditors, in fact, need to do this when they go to for performance audit. And to measure performance, in fact, because this is the focus of the current Commission, performance both for managers and for the auditors. So this is why the big majority of audits at the internal audit services at the Commission are focusing on performance. That does not mean we neglect compliance. Again, case by case in our organization, we have to plan a good balance between our missions, our audit plans, between compliance and performance as it is needed.
Daniela, thank you. Thank you. For in your opinion, what are these questions that now auditors might asking themselves when they are listening to all these changes, new requirements? And now I'm giving word to Tina. Here also her opinion on what difficulties to expect, or what are the most important area now for auditors. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I can see two areas of problems. The first one is the management, at least in Slovenia and probably former Yugoslavian Republic. That's why, for example, we are planning to have an event in February. It will be organized by the Slovenian Institute of Auditors and the Budget Supervision, or its part is CEU. This event will be organized for the management within the Slovenian budget users, and we are going to tell the managers what they could expect from internal auditors. And we are planning to shortly describe the work of internal auditors and present them one report and have a round table with discussion about the added value of internal auditing. And I think it is going to be an excellent opportunity to raise the maturity level of the management within the Slovenian organization in public sector, because you could be the best internal auditor ever if you don't have a person on the other side of the table which recognize your work and understand your work. It's very difficult to be future oriented, and it is very difficult to add value. So I think that the important task from the organizations in different countries which are in charge for the internal auditing is to the value of internal auditors and to find a way to tell the management what could be expected from the auditors. And the second problem is that unfortunately, a lot of internal auditors, they are still not future focused. There are some internal auditors who were in the past working at the accountancy area, or some internal auditors which still oriented only to compliance audits. And like Daniel already explained, it is important for the managers to see some results regarding the performance. So it is on internal auditors to switch from the compliance work, from the only assessing the internal controls, to really start from risks. I think that Mila explained so nice about the assurance mapping, and it is our work to try to use our consultancy role and to try to persuade the management that it is so important to have a kind of assurance mapping also within the budget users, and to just to move forward.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Tina, for your additional insight into public sector challenges. So I can say in relation to internal audit, it's very also nice to hear that there will be events prepared for managers from internal auditors, this kind of raising among management is really important. So this is also some good practice also for other countries. So we will be happy to see any other any messages from this conference that you are planning. I think we still have time for one additional question, and there is not a lot of, maybe you were chatting among you, really a lot going on chat today, but I can see maybe is an additional option. I can see quite some of you who have mics. You also use camera. So if you want to use to maybe something or ask something now, you can just unmute yourself. I can give you chance to decide if you can unmute yourself and ask your question live. It's so possible. Yeah. Somebody speaking? I can maybe see. No, not now. Okay, then I will use this chance to ask this second question.
We have a question. We have a question, Kaya.
Mm-hmm.
Please, you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, Anna, for sending question over to Alexander. So Snezhana's question is, do you think that 2 new standards should be added to existing audit charter? So we heard 2 new standards. And what is from our speakers? Maybe I can give word to Daniela, since she was describing standards really in detail. So these few additional audit standards. What is opinion, Daniela? On yourself.
Okay, so in your charter definitely will some additions and modifications. So you need to the requirements of the new standards, because the charter will empower you to have access to the information, for example, to better communicate with your colleagues from the other units inside your organization, and also to take the role of coordinator of all these assessments that are happening within your organization. If you don't have the picture, then you will not be able to avoid duplication or to fill in the gaps. In the organization, usually you have a separate unit for auditors, compliance functions, and sometimes also it's not uncommon that you have a separate group performing different risk management and functions independently. So the map we are talking about, for example, is the tool that will increase the efficiency and effectiveness into your organization. From my point of view, because you ask about the charter, so the charter is very important to have in there the signature of your chief audit executive, of your resident director general, how you call him. Because if you go to your colleague from internal control unit, let's say, and you will ask him for documents, you see, who are you? And they say, look, here is my charter, and they say, it's no time from my boss. I know you, and I don't have to provide you information. So the charter is important to be discussed and discussed with the chief audit executive and signed by him, and of course will be supervised from the supervisory board. So the supervisory board doesn't have the authority to give you access to assets and to information within your company, within your organization. Will ratify your charter like, let's say, a notary will do, and will say, yes, it's in compliance with the standards, and we agree with this. But what empower you to have access, full access with your organization is the chief officer executive signature. So I encourage you to sit at the table with your boss and explain to him what is the nuances and the obligations, and in your charter, if it's in writing and signed by him. We know in the public sector we need to have laws, we need to have the documents, and we need to be empowered, mandated by the big boss, the minister, the president. Otherwise, we don't have the power and authority to do our job. I think this is basically the answer.
Okay. Yes.
May I add something?
Please.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think that if you are chief audit executive, you have to review and audit your charter at least once a year. And you have to be aware of all the changes in your organizational structure, the legal framework, and also the changes from the IPPF. So if there are changes within the IPPF, it is the obligation that you, like Daniela said, discuss those changes with your minister, the mayor, or director of the hospital, of the agency, and so on. So it is the question, it's not only the question if we have to include the changes from the standard into our charter. The question must be how often should we review our charter, and I think that this must be done at least once a year. You must present to your changes not only from the standards but also changes from the other legal requirements, the changes in organizational structure, in processes, the changes, perhaps some responsible persons are now different than there was in the last year. So you have to sit with your management and discuss all the changes and decide if you have to put those changes into your charter.
Tina, and I would like to use, since there were exactly no other questions from participant side, but I think that maybe I can just one short last question could be, Tina, you mentioned that the new term or activity was added. It was in mission part. New role for internal auditors, so to provide insight. So what do you think, this is something new, what do you think will be impact of this new role of insight on work of auditors? Maybe just in short, is this also?
Perhaps this is new within the mission, but this is something that internal auditors were aware for the long period of time. And I think that if you really want to give a strong assurances, and if you really want to be recognized as a consultant, you have to give this insight, because you have to be one with your organization. And this is only option that you could really add value. So you have to dig deeper. You have to not only give par recommendations, but you have to be aware of your organization as a whole. So I think it is a challenging role of internal auditors, but there are so many key functions like compliance, risk management, not only in private sector but also in public sector. So we must give the management something new. We must be recognized as the first person. We are the third line of defense, but we must be recognized as the most important person within the organization. So perhaps be able to give the insight is an option that we must all use.
Thank you, Tina, for providing this explanation. How insight needs to be understood. That may just already a role of internal auditor, but this is how it's now in wording to provide to really organization, so that you are able to provide insight. If I understand correctly, would you like to add anything?
So the role of internal audit is emphasized, so provide insight. Also, the board's role is emphasized, should provide oversight. And maybe because of this question, what is insight, I would like to talk a little bit about the oversight role of the board, what it means. The board should be involved, the board should provide oversight. So when you design the scope of an external assessment, you will go to the market, for example, with the call for tender. You must invite also the board to provide their concerns and expectations. This board involvement, not doing the assessment, and then the board does not know anything about this. At the end, you see these are the results. No, you have to let them also to provide some of their expectations.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Daniela. So about quality assurance, also about external assessment, we will talk quite soon at the CEF upcoming workshop. So that we will have after also this more insight these questions. Now we are approaching the end of this webinar. So I would like to thank firstly both speakers, Daniela Danescu and Tina Toman-Pfeiffer, for their very comprehensive presentations, for allowing us to understand these changes. Also, of course, more reading will be done. Also, we heard that these new roles should be communicated with management. It's really lines of defense to be able to complete standards and to be able to provide a valid value of internal auditors. Thank you again for your very valuable presentations, and thank you all participants for really full listening, also for your questions. We hope that this webinar was helpful in us to give some additional insight, additional views. We will continue discussing these questions also in our program in 2018, because we heard already in the beginning that IPPF is kind of a framework that is guiding our work. So throughout 2018 we will be also mentioning IPPF and specifically changes standards that are relevant for some specific areas. Thanks once again to everybody. Have a nice day ahead, and we will see each other at another occasion. So,
Bye.
bye.